There are three kinds of people. There are givers, there are takers, and there are matchers. The givers are always focused on what can I do for the other person without any expectations. So I've been always subscribed to that philosophy, 30 years of my life. What matters the most, it's not how much wealth you accumulated, how much difference you made in other people's lives. And if you do it the right way, the wealth becomes a byproduct of that process. More I do, more I get back.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Demo Day, the podcast for entrepreneurs and venture capitalists, where we demystify the culture of joining one of the top accelerator, incubator, or VC programs from around the world. I'm your host, Sean Goldfaden from Coefficient Labs, and on this episode, we'll be interviewing Santhosh Devati from Anamika Ventures. Without further ado, let's get into Demo Day. Santhosh, welcome to another episode of Demo Day. We are so happy to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. So Santhosh, we always start the podcast off the same way, and that's really around getting a better idea of like your why. You know, you've had a long spanning career. You've been in venture, you've worked at teams before, and you've chosen to spend your time investing in startups, you know, helping to guide founders, being an advisor. Why do you choose to spend your time as an investor?
So I have to go one level below to answer why as an investor. So for me in general, as a person, I always love to be that resource for individuals that can help them to go from point A to B. So investor is just one person, I would say, as a mentor, as a friend, as well-wisher, whatever. So it's whatever I engage in. So I always look for those opportunities where I can be of some help to an individual to do that. And when it comes to the investment, it's now when you're not only helping the individual, through that individual, you're creating that impact. That individual goes and helps others through whatever they're creating, through their business. And it kind of becomes a major contributor to the community. And that's what motivates me now, that now you're not just helping one individual. Through that individual, you're helping many.
Within the investor and startup ecosystem, there's so many different motivators. Some people want to get rich. Some people want to, have impact. But, it sounds like for you, a lot of it has to do with like helping, like you said, to take someone from point A to point B and making that larger impact on the community. Where does that come from? Like why is that important to you?
As part of the normal evolution, right? Everybody has their motivations, right? Everybody is working towards certain goals. And in the end, what matters the most is that it's not how much wealth you accumulated, how much difference you made in other people's lives. And if you do it the right way, the wealth becomes a byproduct of that process. For me, like from the early age, I went to boarding school. I think this is where it cemented. What matters the most is that how you show up for others and what you do for others. Everything else, universe takes care of it. So the thing that I heard this a while ago, there are three kinds of people. There are givers, there are takers, and there are matchers. And the people who always love to take, they become the drain on the person. At some point, you need to figure out a way how to optimize your relationship with that community. The matchers, they love to match people. They match different things. They can take pride in matching. The givers are always focused on what can I do for the other person without any expectations, because they strongly believe that universe conspires in a way to bring rewards back to them when they do a good deed. So I've been always like kind of subscribed to that philosophy. My take is about, don't matter, just give. And everything will take care of it. And then my 30 years of my life, I witnessed it. More I do, more I get back.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to giving, some people, it's so natural. It's like built into them from like the very beginning, and others take that from a role model. They didn't even know that there was a karmic energy that the more good you do, the more it returns. Do you relate more to your mom or your dad? Like, were they an influence in that sort of thought, or was it something that came from within, or came from, religious study, or came from something where you yourself just always knew that that was your path? I'm curious, did you find that from within, or do you take inspiration from one of your parents in particular that really helped shape that?
There's no one particular person, but I would say it's more circumstances based. The situations I was in, and those circumstances kind of shaped my thinking, my mental models, and how I need to interact with the outside world. I'll give you a situation where when I was in boarding school, there was a conflict between the teacher and the student. And now, teacher was on the wrong side of it. But when you're part of the institution, it is very difficult to take on the teacher. Because in this boarding school, it's like a jail. So you have to figure out a way, you have to yield to what the protocols are. And at that point, there's something wrong has happened. Now you have two choices. One, you figure out a way to stand up and make it right, or you just let it pass by. Right? More and more situations you encounter, at some point, that transformation bugs, gets in. And then you're like, no, I have to do something, right, if nobody else is doing it. I think that was the start for me, where when things weren't happening and nobody's taking the lead to rectify the situation, then kind of that influenced me to get into the position to do something about it. And then, kind of it developed this discipline in me that, a natural caretaker, whether it's in a social setting or a personal setting, or anybody like who knows me well. If you ask them, they'll say, okay, I can lean on this guy anytime.
That's I think an amazing attribute to move towards, being the person that your friends can depend on, your family can depend on, your team can depend on. I could imagine that from a spiritual perspective fills your cup up, knowing that you're there for them in that way. Tell us a little bit more about early life. We're shooting this podcast right now here in Santa Monica. We're in Los Angeles. Are you from Los Angeles? Maybe you could talk about where you grew up and what early life was like for you.
I grew up in India. I came to US in 99. So I come from a business family. I'm a black sheep in my family. So always, if my dad says go south, I'll go north. In a good way. So when he said, join the family business or whatever, I said, no. I said, I want to experience the world. So I said, no, I'm not joining the business. I want to go to US. And then I just came to US through a company to do to offer technology solutions. And that was the start for me to getting into the US. And when I got here, I got posted in New York City. And it was the best 3.5 years of my life. 99 to good part of 2003, I would say. And we went through the .com highs and lows. So it just that I wanted to establish my own identity outside of my family identity. And that's what kind of pushed me towards the US. But just growing up, I always felt that, when you kind of, when you're part of the traditional family, business family, you're always under the shadow of what has already been built generationally. For me, it's more like, how do I create my own identity outside of that? And that's what, kind of pushed me going towards the boarding school and doing all the things that I've done. I would say all through my life, only 3 years of my life, I've been with my parents 365 days a year. But the rest of the time, I was away. Now, it's boarding school. Like by education, I'm a computer science engineer and an MBA. And that helped me to find the good balance between the tech and the business.
Having interviewed so many people, learning that transition, like you said, of kind of, at some point you got to stand up to the teacher or stand up to your parents. Was it a difficult transition for you to explain to your dad that you were not going to go in that direction? Did that, was it easy? Was it something that, they were in complete support of, or was that a moment in your life of like standing up to the teacher, standing up to what kind of is the, you do this, then you do this, and it sounds like you felt like you wanted to create your own identity. Was that a moment of friction, or was it something that kind of catapulted you into this new life?
I would say it wasn't an easy conversation to have.
Really?
But at the same time, my dad was quite, like, he understood where I was coming from. And being his son, he knows who I am. So he said, okay, I cannot change his mind. Might as well support him. And then he said, okay, if you want to be on your own, go ahead. But if things don't work, you always have a play here. And then said, if you want to go ahead, and then you're on your own. So that, kind of gave me additional motivation.
Yeah.
Now I need to prove that I can survive outside the family infrastructure.
That's awesome. And so once you got to New York, it must have been like such a different, environment than you had grown up in India. And so what was your path to get into tech? I mean, I saw that you went to engineering school in the late 80s. This is way before startups were a thing and, building technology. And so you've really like seen the progression of tech over the last 20-ish years. What was it like for you to get into the industry? What was your focus? Did you know you wanted to be in tech startups, or was that something that evolved over the course of you being in the United States?
I would say it organically evolved, but it wasn't like when I came to the state. I didn't come with an intention to be part of the tech startups, but I came just in search of opportunities. And how do I, coming from business families, that like entrepreneurship is always in me, right? So it's just that even though you were working for someone else, but you always had this independent, way of doing things. And I mean, not to kind of impact the company in a negative way, but in a positive way. So when I came here through a company, and then I had started working with fashion brands, and having that tech, like computer science engineering background and the MBA. So I was able to see what was going on at that company and where the gaps were. And it was easy for me to come up with a solution or architect a solution that helps them to overcome the challenge they were facing. One of the challenges at that company was that, without naming the company, is that it's a fashion brand. And when someone plans for a season and they like say how we are having conversation, like the buyer and seller, they sit across each other and they plan for the season. When they plan for the season, they plan it at the style color level, and they use assortment ratios to expand the style color into by SKU. For example, if you take the shirt,
beautiful pink shirt I have.
Yes, style, color, is size makes it a SKU. It's a single unit, right? And then when they plan, okay, I need that style color in 10 units for these many doors. When I say door, each store is considered as a door, right? So now break that 12 units into 5 large, 2 medium, 2 small type of thing. And then they never updated the assortment ratios. They always used even the style color planning was at the most recent estimates, but they used the dated assortment ratios to create the purchase order. And it goes to the Chinese manufacturer and it gets, produced, and it comes to the US. And when they have to match the real purchase order from like a Macy's or Nordstrom or somebody, because now since they use the dated assortment ratios, it doesn't match with the current purchase order. And they have to, again, place an order to produce to match that purchase order. And what happens to this inventory? It becomes unsold inventory, and then they have to sell it to discounted retailers like TJ Maxx or Kohl's. And more, the inventory piles up, and the inventory carrying cost goes up. And then it eats into the profitability. The simple, and they were doing all through the Excel spreadsheet. And they were linking up 20, 30 Excel spreadsheets. And there was no way to figure out, is it accurate and how it's happening? The solution was more commonsensical. But I think when you're so close to it, you don't realize it. Then I said, okay, all you have to do is, now when sitting across each other, when you're preparing the buy plan, now get confirmation on the assortment ratios. Until that point, nobody looked at the assortment ratios. And then they said, okay, they showed the assortment ratio to the buyer. And they said, no, this doesn't make sense. They updated the assortment ratios. Now say it's in the system. So we created a production order from the system without manually going in and creating those orders for the manufacturer. With this simple change, right, and they were able to match the inventory close to 100%. So like whatever got produced, they were shipping out of the warehouse. As that happened, then now the inventory carrying cost dropped dramatically and boosted the profitability. And this has all happened within the first 3 months. And that put me in front of the highest women paid executive in the corporate world. And she was managing at that time of a $2.7 billion group. They had 14 plus brands. And, me like sitting on the 90th floor in the New York City, and I'm just three months into the States. I'm already still in that dream zone.
Yeah.
Like everything what I have kind of seen in the Hollywood movie, now it's kind of unraveling in real life in front of me. So now this lady walks in. I think she was like a little closer to late 60s, and she was like a tiny but mighty lady with a little dog comes in, and then you got 5 minutes. Go. I'm like, what, 5 minutes? So basically the VP merchandising said, no, she wants you to do your spiel for 5 minutes, and that's all she has. So, okay, fine, because I'm also trying to adapt to the lingo.
Yeah, for sure.
And then she said, okay, fine. She heard whatever she needed to hear. And the next day said, the VP calls me into the office and says, she was so impressed, and she's giving you blank check. What's your price? Like, what? Do you have a price? And then she explained what does she mean is like, what are your expectations? Whatever compensation you want, you'll get it. So I'm not up for sale, but I'll do everything what I can to help you guys to get through this. And then that solutions became the standard for the group, not only in the North America, but Europe and Asia, everywhere. For any homegrown application to be in the as part of the infrastructure for, let's say, 17, 18 years, it's unheard of. Because everything is like standardized, like SAP, or like you take it off the shelf and then customize it to any homegrown application to kind of live that long, it is unheard of. And the reason for that is because it's not just a standalone solution. I made sure that it is integrated with different systems to be more efficient. So it was integrated with the visual merchandising software so that now the Macy's or Nordstrom, when they do the store planning, you might have seen it. When you go there, they have different fixtures, like across fixtures, so the shelves and that. And they plan, and then what merchandise goes on each of those fixtures. All the things that was in the planning software, it all went into like integrated to that. It was automatically populated the visual merchandising flow plans.
Fascinating.
And then it integrated with the transaction system. So it created the master files and that. And then because they were doing all the interns, and then when you use interns, I mean, no offense to interns, but there was a lot of human errors, how you create it. And it used to take a lot to clean up that mess. So since everything was getting it from the planning software, I said, why do you have to have a human intervention at that point? It can be integrated or automated, that now you don't need to have an army of interns inputting this data. And then that was automated, so the accuracy went through the roof. So this way, I think within the 6 months, I got put into this different situations where it was like I was on a high every single day. So so then every day, like even for me, like when I landed in JFK, there was a stretch limo that was like you see in Hollywood movies. And then you got picked up in the stretch limo and then took you to the Hilton Hotel right across the Radio City. It's like, wow, I made it. And then I ended up staying like 3.5 months at the hotel paying daily rate.
Wow. Well, it was just, you just loved it too much.
I mean, they were okay because the value that I was providing to them.
Absolutely. And so you were working, in that environment, and was there something while you were working there, in the late 90s, the early 2000s, was there a moment where you started to say, okay, like, the world is changing and shifting towards tech and engineering and data and building systems? And was there a moment that you said, I want to get more into the tech ecosystem? I know, Anamika's now been around for years, almost a decade. And so what was kind of the transition from, advising, consulting, working with different teams to, I want to invest in companies. I want to spend my own money or LP money even to drive value across the tech and startup ecosystem?
Always being a technologist, I'm a firm believer of tech needs to be part of the equation to make anything happen. So like even another fun fact is when I did my engineering, I was the first one at my university to do a paper on AI. This was in 91.
Wow.
And now like looking at all the AI can do, it's like a kid in a candy store. So it's just like at that time, it was a fantasy, 91. So whatever the research had to do and kind of do, because I became a firm believer of at some point down the stretch, we're going to go down this path, right? And it took about 35 years. So we are here. But being a technologist, I always kind of leaned on tech to help companies to realize their top line and bottom line goals. And then that kind of, strengthened my belief even more as and when we complete every project. So there was another phenomenal work that I always take pride in. We were working with a bank, and this particular bank had this compliance report that they need to create every 3 months. So now every 3 months, like 12 weeks. And it used to take them 10 weeks to put that together because they will have to go into like 15 different systems, get the information, use Excel spreadsheet, right? And then kind of collate data in such a way that you can generate that final compliance report, which had 31 line items. Each line item is a separate metric. Generally, when you use a platform like a business intelligence tool, you cannot, generate a report, like each line being a separate metric. So then if you have to do everything has to be pre-calculated beforehand while generating the report. So then all this needs to be now looked into. So that time after the .com crash, everybody were pulling back the investment. So I came up with this program called Quick Start. So land and expand strategy. So basically it said, you pick a challenge which can be solved realistically within 5 weeks, right? And if we solve that, then you know what we are capable of and what else we can help you with. So then CIO said, okay, fine. Now help me with this compliance report. Can you automate this entire process in 5 weeks? So we said, okay, fine, no issues. I started how hard it can be. Started looking at it and everything that they were doing. And it was a team of, I would say, 9 people and working with the data. And then some of the systems were back in the COBOL mainframes. And nobody knows how to read the COBOL. When engineering, I was the king of COBOL. So I said, no, don't worry, give me the source programs. I can cipher it I can extract the logic and then we can validate it together. And it's not. So I was literally working about 21 hours a day straight. And then at the time, even there was an incident where I had the hernia incident, and then doctor prescribed me codeine pills. I was popping codeine pills on one side and going through the work. And at the end of the 5th week, the entire process was transformed at a single click. The report can be generated at any given point.
Wow.
Right. So now you can see the power of technology. When you lean into technology and do it the right way, how much technology can unlock value for a company. So I ended up, building that whole business intelligence practice to 300 plus people with operations in US and India. And then, so I went through my iterations in the business. In beginning of 2018, I was like, okay, I've done my enough, time in being an entrepreneur. So I want to transition to the other side, to be an investor. So at that time, like me and my daughter, her name is Anamika, and the venture's name comes after her, Anamika Ventures. So she and her, like the picture that I see over there, she was like, 5-6-year-old, and we used to watch Shark Tank together. And she was asking all these little questions, like cute questions, like, oh, why did she ask this or that? So I felt, okay, it would be nice as a dad, then, you can start laying the foundation for her and build a portfolio for her. And that's how it got started. And then first thing everybody asks is, what's your thesis of investment? Like, okay, how do I respond in a smarter way? Then when I started doing research, the stat that caught my attention is how much women are undersupported, underrepresented. And I said, being a girl dad, and this is much more meaningful to be part of this larger team in the tech ecosystem that are working on changing that dynamic to bring parity to that equation. So then I made investing in women as a core thesis of the investment. And that's how the female focus kind of the whole venture investment started off for me. And then after making several investments as an angel, you realize, oh, this is great. Initially the emotions take over and you make investments and you realize, oh, this is a long tail. This, it's not going to materialize. And I said, okay, how do I de-risk the angel investments that I've done? Then I said, okay, then one way to de-risk the individual investment is by getting access to the basket. And that what opened the doors for me to become an LP in other venture funds. And said, okay, now if I'm becoming an LP in funds, let me align myself with the funds that have similar theses, and which is basically investing in women. So that's how it led me to become an LP in Halogen Ventures. You might know Jesse Draper, right? And then also invested in summer and winter batches of Y Combinator 21. I see that. So the same with the women focused. But having, I would say, to this date, my portfolio is predominantly structured around women founders, but still, I would say there are some exceptions. I also, along the way, supported male-founded teams, companies, and in a small percentage, I would say, compared to the women portfolio. And that's how kind of it all came together. Then, other thing, I'm a problem solver at my heart. So just that now, when I started interacting with other LPs, and then people who have not invested in this venture asset class at all, who are very conservative, and they said, okay, what stops you from investing in startups? One, like, we don't know how to go about it. Number two is like, it's illiquid. When I need money, it's very difficult to get that money out. So the liquidity is a second major concern. The third one is definitely not the lack of know-how, but also it's a high risk in nature. And then how do you encourage people to, because we all know if you have a good spread, if what the general thumb rule is 1 in 100.
Wow, is that 1 in 100?
1 in 100.
You're saying become like a fund returner.
The fund return, or even if you're doing the angel investments, let's say if you invest in one particular company, your probability is 50-50. Now, if you invest in 2 companies, as you expand, you're diversifying. If your portfolio is diversified, your risk is mitigated to an extent. right? So I think this is where even relate. Like when you spread your bets, you have better probability of getting something in return. Otherwise, just going in, oh, red or black, or just one number, right? So the logic there is about make multiple investments so that way your money is protected to an extent. And then for like people who don't have any exposure at all, for them it becomes harder. How do you source the deals? How do you do the due diligence on those deals? How do you go about it? And people who are who are in the business and they have their own inside sources, and sometimes those inside deals never show up in the main market.
Now, one of the things that is fascinating about your journey as an angel is that, many VCs, either they'll start a, traditional VC fund, they'll go to raise capital from outside LPs, or maybe they start out as like a associate or a principal and then rise to the ranks. But there's some context around like, this is how we do it here. It's kind of like we have a thesis, we do this, we do this, we do this. But as an angel investor, you're really having to like entrust in your own processes, your own ability. No one has kind of like set you up for success. So what was that early learning experience like for you? Was there a book that you read? Was there a mentor that you had? Being able to jump into any business and help them with automation or help them with their systems is one piece, but trying to envision what 10 years out is going to look like, and putting your family's money and what could go to your daughter is now being invested into these other people. And so what was like your early strategy, and how did you think about what companies to invest in, and how should you decide, and how do I even do due diligence? Like, what was the kind of like square one for you transitioning from day to day into an angel investor?
I'm a self-learner that way. So there's no one particular book or one particular podcast or one particular...
They didn't have demo day back then.
I mean, it would have been helpful if that demo day was existed. I would have learned a lot. I'm a curious learner, so always like to see what the current practices are. Is there a way that current practices can be evolved to make it better? So when I started on the angel route, that's why I said like initially that, I mean, once you have access to your network, the deal starts flowing, right?
People need money.
People need money. And then how do you go about which company is the right company, right? For me, always it's about the impact of that company. And I know in the end that some businesses succeed, some businesses don't. Even last week, there was a startup that I invested a couple of years ago, and they were running out of money. Now they had an option: either shut the doors or get acquired for cents on the dollar, and then still continue to make impact, and then work towards earning out. Right. So now, like, as an investor, basically you lose quite a money. And at the same time now, will you be mad at that founder, or will you be supportive of that founder? Right? At that point, when I had that conversation, I totally understood. I mean, there's no way that, they can do it on their own. They need help. And they cannot lean on outside investors to put in the capital, because they know already, like, there's no capital like in the bank. So it will be very difficult to kind of take the company forward. And now, instead of that understanding, like I said, okay, don't worry about it. First of all, are you okay? And the second is, okay, so I understand the strategy in terms of now aligning with this particular company. Now you'll be able to realize pipeline. That is, you have a quite handsome pipeline. So now let's say if that all works out, and you'll be able to get some earn out. At the same time, the investor will be able to get some money back. So which is not a bad proposition, right? So it's just you kind of, when you're investing, you don't realize this situation. This may happen.
Yeah.
Right. And then there will be somebody else who will come. Oh, now the new VC wants to, entertain the round, only pay to play. So that means your shares might get converted from preferred to common shares if you don't, participate. So at that time, and these are the things that you don't understand early on. As you go through each situation, you're learning different new things. Right. I think for me it's about when I started the journey, it was more on the emotional side of it. Okay, this particular founder is good at ABC and wants to do things in a certain way and want to impact the world in a certain way. So does it line up? And then if it does, then everything else can be administered like in a way that strategies, because when you start off a business with a certain strategy, it never stays the same. You have to adapt, you have to make adjustment as the macro conditions change, and then to be relevant and continue to do well in the line of work, right? So for me, I always kind of I leaned on to my own strengths in terms of understanding where the gaps are, how the founder is trying to solve the gaps. Is it realistic? Is it pragmatic? And if it is, then okay, this might make a good sense to invest in. And that's how I got started off. But more and more I learned there's a lot to it. You have to kind of cover your bases from the legal side, from the other aspects to protect your investment. It's not like when you need money, like if you invest in a stock market, you can go and sell anytime. When I say within the working hours of the market, right? But the startup, like, okay, I want to pull out, it's not going to happen. I think it's just more and more, I got introduced to different situations through the life cycle of each startup, and then how I evolved my own methodology in terms of how do I go about doing the due diligence and identifying opportunities. Sometimes it may look so good on paper, and it takes time to execute that, right? And then that's the entrepreneur has the tenacity or perseverance to go through that and execute for the next 5 years or 10 years to make that happen. And then what I know the best is the technology. So every time when I invest, I'll see how much the startup or the founder is leaning into technology. If they're not leaning into technology, then that's not the right investment for me. So then, which with the similar thesis, they help me to invest in space, quantum, deep tech, and then healthcare, fintech. So everything that I see, it has to be at the intersection of technology.
What has been the single decision or inflection point that most accelerated your career as an investor?
It's a multiple. There is no, I cannot single out one situation, but just that the journey I was on, like since 2018, I've been on. And over the years, that it made me believe that this asset class is a must in the portfolio construction. I mean, you can go towards the equity, you can go towards the real estate, you can own commodities like gold and all that. But venture asset class is a must in the portfolio construction to generate meaningful returns, right? And then when you put this venture asset class into the portfolio, then you also, key there is to diversify. You cannot lean into only one particular thesis. Which I started off as being sector specialist. Now I'm more sector agnostic. Because if you want to diversify, being sector agnostic, stage agnostic is key. You cannot just go all into the early stage companies, because early stage companies takes a long time to get to the promised land. But if you kind of have a good mix between the early stage and the late stage, so you got downside protection from the capital standpoint, but at the same time, you have a higher probability of realizing better returns on that investment. So that's the, I would say, transformation that took place. And because I started off being an early stage investor, and then as and when I went through the motions of the early stage investing, then it made me realize I cannot just be in the early stage, but I need to have the balance between the early stage and the late stage to hedge one against the other.
Now, when I would imagine that oftentimes you'll get into a situation where you're looking at maybe two different companies. Maybe they're very similar, maybe they're very different, but the essence of them, one, they both feel like they could be an investment, but, you really dig in and you decide that, one of them is great and one of them's just good, and you're going to invest in the great company. What attributes does that great company have? How can you differentiate between your best investments or the great investments versus the good investments or those that may not end up working out?
But everything is momentary, right? The company can be great at this time, but it doesn't guarantee that company can continue to be great in the future. And the good company might elevate to the great status if they do the right way. Right. So for me, it is, I picked it up from the Good to Great. I don't know whether you read that book. I highly recommend that in a level 5 leadership. It's amazing. So I put myself under that level 5 leadership. But when I encounter investments, like so two investments, very similar in nature, for me, it always one of the factor came into play is that which founder can benefit more from what I can offer. Not coachable standpoint, but whatever I can offer, which one is going to benefit more and which one is willing to receive those inputs. So my capital always went towards the individual who's open and at the same time yielding to my thoughts and making adjustments to the strategy, how they can evolve. So then I felt, it not only that I'm making an investment, but it also helping me with my own internal compass, which is to help individual to go from point A to B. Right. I always believed, and it's not just about the capital, but if I have the opportunity to help someone, that's the right investment for me. So always chosen investments where I can partake, not being pain in the rear, but also like being an on-demand advisor or a coach to help them get unstuck if they're stuck without having any regular cadence.
What are some of the most common mistakes that new angel investors make or new fund managers make that, now you've had years to kind of reflect back on your experience? If you were to start all over again, what are some of the mistakes that, you would have changed, or what can maybe someone that's just starting their very first fund or just becoming an angel investor, what's some of the things that they could learn from your early mistakes?
It's not a long list. Because I think I'm a firm believer of sometimes when the business doesn't work, it's not a true reflection of the person. In certain cases, it may be. In certain cases, it's because of the macro conditions, the whole economy, how it changes. But let's say I always love to give the benefit of doubt to people. And if someone is trying to solve a high-tech problem without any technical background, like one of the founders might be good in business, but doesn't have any technical expertise, but trying to create a platform to solve an issue in the business that they're expert at. When they don't have a technical co-founder, I felt, they can always find one, right? And it never materializes. The percentage of success in that kind of scenario is very small, right? So I kind of burned a couple times that way, where, I said, okay, let me give the benefit of doubt to the founder. The founder may find a good technical co-founder or build a good technical team and take it forward. And it did not materialize 3 or 4 years later. This is where the balance on the technical side or the talent is one of the key factors I look for, depending upon what they're trying to see, how much talent that they have as of that time. And with the existing talent, will they be able to get there? If not, what are additional skill sets that they need to get there? And additional skills, how difficult it is to get, right? And if the gap is wider, then I say, okay, as much as it's compelling, I have a conviction in the idea, but it may falter on the execution side. That is one thing now I always constantly look for. it's good to always give the benefit of doubt. There could be, okay, this person might be different, but history repeats itself.
In the times that you've had issues, you've seen that you gave a little too much room of saying, oh, they will find this person. And so is the learning that, you really want the founder you're investing in to have the talent and the skill of the problem they're trying to solve, as opposed to, I have this idea or this problem, but I actually don't know how to do the thing myself.
Right. Not necessarily in all the things needs to be in one person. Let's say if it's, this is where it gets different, being a solo founder or multiple founded team, right? So when you are more than one person, then you have a larger skill portfolio. But when you're a solo founder, we're limited. I mean, there's nothing wrong being a solo founder, but as long as, what you're embarking on, what you want to realize it, if you got everything that you need to realize that, then it's great.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And now, if you have some gaps, either you need to have someone to fill that gap as part of the team at that time, or you need to bring on someone as a co-founder. Or sometimes it's a 2-person or 3-person or 4-person founded team. So I think those are a little more encouraging in terms of, because they have a diverse skill set and collectively they should be able to get where they need to be. It doesn't mean that solo founder don't succeed, they succeed, but it's just that it comes down to the playbook, whether the playbook is favorable to a solo founder or a multiple.
Do you see that changing with AI? Like, 10 years ago, 3 years ago, it's just like, it was impossible, like I just have never coded. I would never be a coder. Right. But now you see something like a Claude, or you see something like a, ChatGPT, and you now have this ability to create content or to create code or to create products. Like, do you see the fundamentals changing, and do you expect to see more solo founders or more smaller teams, but that have stacks of different agentic flows that are part of their...
Yeah, I definitely see that as a reality. Now you can do more with small resource pool, but now agents being part of that workflow. So in this case, let's say if you have to take a practical example, let's say doctor wants to create a software that automates their intake. Right? So now the doctor can lean on the AI agent to create that. With AI, definitely you have a better probability of in succeeding than before, where you didn't have a technical co-founder trying to do that. It would have been a little harder. Right? But now even with the agent, I would say you're not 100% there. You may be 70% there, but you still need to fill the rest 30% with the human talent. And that talent needs to be an expert in tech. Right? To bring that, in this context of the doctor's example, to make that a reality. So with AI agents, definitely our life is going to be much better. It becomes more efficient and makes us more productive. We can do a lot more things, but you still need that human expertise to tie the loose ends. And that to tie the loose ends also requires certain skill set. And if one person has that skill set, great. If not, then multiple people have to partake in tying up that loose end to make it a closed loop.
And so what qualities do you look for in teams? Knowing that a lot of the teams you're investing in are at their earlier stage, like what are the sort of qualities in a solid team that you want to see?
One is the team dynamics, how well they gel with one another, right? It's like a marriage, right? So early on, with euphoria takes over and then it carries you forward. When you start encountering the business, going through the motions of the business, and that's when your relationships with one another get tested, right? And in those testing times, do they have mental makeup and the strength to overcome that situation and stay together and make it happen? And we have seen so many situations where co-founders split for whatever reason is, but it's just that the team, are they gelling. And at the same time, I mean, no team is free from conflict. There's always going to be conflict in some shape or form. But is the team good enough to be able to resolve conflict and move forward? And that can happen only with seeing team in action. And then you can see in different situations. So always I try to, you don't arrive at some kind of a judgment based on one conversation. You like to have multiple conversation in multiple setting, so that way you can get different read, and then you can draw inference from that read. So earlier I used to like one or two, conversation that was good enough for me. But now I made it a point that you need to have more conversation. I mean, you cannot just go by the data room. Everything is on paper. It's great, but what you read, like when you are in front of that person, whether virtually or having that conversation, like organic conversation, you can learn a lot. Right. I think I'm very good at reading, let's say, listening to what not being said.
Reading between the lines.
Reading between the lines, or also like hearing what not being said. So I'm good, and I'm a good observer. So I can kind of connect the dots. It always helped me to get favorable outcome that whatever I'm part of.
Yeah.
So if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. What advice do you have for founders when building their team? You get a mentee. They're, saying, Santhosh, I just got my first angel investment check. I want to hire, my first CTO, or I want to hire my first designer. What advice do you have for founders in building the early team at a startup?
There are two parts to that. First part is, let's say if you want to get a CTO, he or she whether has the skill set to play that role and has the right experience to play that role, right? That's the first part in terms of doing the skills matching. The second part is the most important one for me, is that can you see working with that person 1 year from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now? How do you kind of work? What would be your relationship in a conflict situation or different in those instances? Do you see yourself working it through that person? I think this is why sometimes it's not just about looking at the resume, looking at the background and doing it, but the interpersonal aspect of it plays a vital role. I always encourage them to look into both sides.
If you've ever been in this situation, there are so many founders, especially non-technical founders, that they'll go to a networking event and they're like looking for their partner. They're looking for this person. And just like in dating, you sort of are like, I mean, I think there's a good vibe, but I don't know what it's like to fight with this person. I just met them at a networking event or a coffee or something. And so how do you mentor the people or entrepreneurs you advise in being able to know, is this someone that I could work with years down the road? Or is there any questions that should be asked, or is there any references that should be checked, or what can a founder do to try to minimize the risk of partnering with someone that maybe is not the right fit for them?
I mean, reference is definitely a great source. So, but I think you can also do I sometimes you can agree to disagree on certain things intentionally, and then now you both are not in the same place. So how does the other person react when you disagree or when you challenge? And then you can get a read from that situation.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Right.
Almost like, it's almost like a test of seeing, how would someone respond in that sort of
So without naming any companies or whatever, in one of the startup invest. So founder approached me and said, okay, great. And the founder went through the story and great. So I said, okay, I challenged one of the points. Then I said, I totally disagree with this. And I gave intentionally a different take on it. And founder did not like it. I'm the expert. You don't know what you're saying. Right? So now instantly, in that instant, right? That founder is not coachable,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I mean, I'm not saying that what I said is right, right? So the founder should be open
Yeah.
to looking at hearing different views or perspectives to see how you can refine it. But if you're so closed and you get intimidated when someone challenges you, that means you have higher bar to cross over to succeed.
Yeah, I remember interviewing Anna Barber, years ago now, but she has a line that she utilizes for her founders where she says she's looking for strong convictions loosely held. And that, she wants to see the conviction, but not be so tight to that conviction that they're not able to take advice or coaching or see different perspectives.
No, that's a great. I think this is where when you kind of poke them in different ways, then you can learn a lot about that individual.
Yeah, no, that's it's funny because I was going to say like how my next question was going to be how do you evaluate a founder's ability to navigate setbacks? And it sounds like a way is, probing with questions that are counter to what their thesis is and seeing how they navigate around that and, whether they get flustered or take coaching or ideas. Once you have a meeting with a founder and you're sort of like, oh, that was a pretty good meeting, what do you want from them? Like, what's the best way? A founder has a great meeting with you. What do you want to see from them? How do you want them to follow up with that meeting?
So generally now I say like, after the first, let's say we had a great meeting and then I like to be kept in the loop. I want to see what happens, right? So when you're in a situation when you have a great conversation, so then at that point you're a little bit emotional, right? So you're kind of riding high based on that conversation, based on that context. Unless you take pause, unless you step away, you're not able to let that sink in. And that's the standard, like a sleep on it, right? So for me, it's been, okay, this is great, but keep me, and then let's have another conversation or so. So then see what happens after that. Or let's say, and I think this is where in 2001, 2002, everything was, no, you have till the end of the day, or by tomorrow I need the answer. Right? After that, that now there's no that rush, like in terms of now people can wait. Right. And because there was a lot of capital flowing around in 2021, 22, because of COVID or all the things that stock market was also doing well. And everybody's were jumping into the private equity or the startup investing. I think at that time, this sense of urgency, I think now it's more, everything is getting pulled back and this is happening in a more structured, more methodical, more calmer way. I think I like this pace than that pace. So now you can kind of go through the motions for a month or two to understand the person, the team, and the business. And then you can kind of arrive at your decision in a more informed way.
What lessons from deals that you've missed or potentially like bets that have underperformed? I think you just mentioned that one of your founders, is in a situation where they may need to close the door. They may need to get acquired for, pennies on the dollar. What have you learned from that experience that you can then advise some of your other portfolio companies to avoid those situations?
The one thing that I always kind of now look for is how much runway they left. So that's definitely is coming from the lesson that learned. If you're trying to back a company which has only 3 months, but there is no, which is fine, as long as they have some sources that are close to finish line in getting that additional capital. If they're not close to getting the additional capital, then even though it doesn't matter how great they are or what, but without money you cannot move forward. Right, so the runway definitely becomes one of the critical factors. And then second would be in terms of which investment or private, like VC firms or angel investors are part of the mix. Right, and then that also gives you a good read in terms of which way it is headed. I mean, we don't have to go deeper into that particular aspect. I don't want
Sure.
rub people on the wrong side. But then, so these are all the things that there are certain, you cannot tell the founder that, because each situation is different, right? So it's as long as the founder has the discipline to the physical discipline, which is managing the funds in a more efficient way at the same time, and have the clarity and the focus in terms of stitching together small wins towards the big win. Right. So this is where sometimes when your concept is great and you have the ability to go work on it, and then you ignore the customer. So we got the money to pay ourselves for the next 15 months. And then you're developing the product in silo, like in a closed environment without much interaction with the audience that they end up using that. And then you realize, oh, they don't want that. So this is all kind of goes towards the customer discovery.
Yeah.
Right. So then you have to I tell them, don't try to do in isolation, but do alongside the customer or whoever. They can be your beta testers or beta users or whatever you want to call them. But having that interaction, having the clarity on who you want to provide service to, and they wanted that validation. And if you don't, then doesn't matter, how beautiful your system is, but it's not going to connect. Right. So I think this is where I get more and more. I said that don't get attached to what you're building, but get attached to what you're solving and seeking validation from the community that you want to provide service to, and then develop the system accordingly.
It's such good advice. I mean, I think that, even us here at Coefficient Labs, I mentioned, we're building this new product, and it's so hard to not get wrapped up in what it could be and the features and, wouldn't it be cool if X, Y, and Z, but you very quickly lose the why are we doing this, or what's the output we're looking for? And I think that's really, really great advice for founders. Santhosh, what are you most excited about right now as far as market trends? Obviously, AI is the hot, button of today. Last year, or years past was crypto and blockchain. And there's always going to be this evolution. And I'm sure someone in your position that has seen the evolution over a 20, 30-year arc, it's even more prevalent. What's the thing or the trend that's happening right now that's got your attention?
Definitely the convergence of crypto and AI.
Crypto and AI together.
Together. Because the Genius Act and the Clarity Act, Genius Act is already passed. And Clarity Act is in the works. It passed the House. Now it has to come through the Senate. If these two come through, it's going to revolutionize the whole financial system. The stablecoin movement, I think we don't have the complete understanding of how it's going to influence our day-to-day life. But I do think that there's a parallel financial system is getting created. Now, everything revolves around the SWIFT infrastructure for the money movement in the current setup. Now, with the stablecoin, things coming on chain, now it's more efficient, more faster, and it helps the dollar to maintain its reserve status globally. So now almost 85% to 80 to 89% of the global transaction happens around the dollar. Right. So now let's say if you're moving from here to Brazil, in a traditional setup, in an existing conventional setup, it takes about 5 days. Or you can kind of do certain magic and then try to do it to 3 days. But now with the stablecoin, it can be done within a few minutes. So I think this is where creating the digital version of the dollar, why the stable coins are pegged to the dollar, And then how even the Treasury Secretary came out and said that he envisions this to be a $3 trillion market cap. And today the stablecoin is 250 million. Imagine from 250 million to the $3 trillion market cap. And how much, I think what I would say that how the Shopify has also came up with their own option to let shoppers to pay through their crypto, through stable coins. And they are working with Coinbase to provide that option. Now, if you look at the e-commerce shopping cart earlier, credit card, debit card, and then came the pay now, buy now and pay later, right? And then PayPal, Venmo. So these are all now you can start seeing an option for the stablecoin as part of the checkout option. Right. So there are a lot of companies now going to look at it, how they can help for banking institutions or any company in any sector, how to come on chain from being off chain. And then I think there's a lot of innovation is going to happen to make that migration. The migration may not be the right word, because now to diversify into the on-chain infrastructure. You continue to exist. I think this is why even the JP Morgan now talking about coming up with their own stable coin, because they understand. And most of the transactions goes to the JP Morgan network. Now they need to have presence in this alternate world. Otherwise, their supremacy may get challenged. And that's the reason they also started acquiring so many fintech startups along the way in the last 4-5 years. And I wouldn't be surprised if JP Morgan becomes the number one player in the crypto world as well.
Wow.
Right.
Wow, so hot take from Santhosh.
So I think that's where that's one definitely, I would say, the convergence of AI and the crypto. That's quite interesting to me. And the second one is the space. The satellite constellation, which is going to be huge. I don't know how much you're following on the space side, but I would say it's, for you, because we are close to Long Beach.
Yeah,
There are a lot of space companies, including Rocket Labs. Rocket Labs is a distant second to the SpaceX. And 2 days ago, they did the 70th successful launch. And they have the similar, like a smaller rocket, has a similar technology where you can reuse one rocket for multiple carriers. So now in terms of the logistics, taking the payload here is the satellites. Right. So how Starlink has established the satellite to provide internet service. And there is a company called AST Global, which is a publicly traded company. Now they are providing satellite to cell service. So now in all the dead zones, now the telephone carriers don't have to invest heavy amount of capital to build up the towers and the cables. Instead, they can transition to the satellite and back and forth. So now they can provide the coverage to the cell phone user without any interruption and with lesser investment. So then every sector going to have their own constellation. Same thing with insurance. They're going to have the constellation to do better underwriting. So there's a lot of companies will have to come up in the space to manage the workload of all the economy, the space economy that is happening. So that is, I would say, second sector, which is fastly growing. And the third would be the mobility, air mobility, right? Like eVTOLs, vertical takeoff and landers. They are very close, I would say, about another year or two, that becomes a reality. I think there's Archer Aviation, which is also a publicly traded company, and they are the preferred vendor for 2028 Olympics in LA. So they put out a paper out there, from here to Orange County, under 30 minutes, under $75. And you can take that ride any given day instead of sitting on 5 freeway.
Wow. And it's an airplane that goes.
So this is autonomous, but I don't think FAA will definitely go with pilotless to begin with for the safety reasons. But there'll be a pilot on board, but it'd be like FSD. Right. So it can do on its own, but the drivers needs to be attentive enough to interact with the wheel. Same thing with the aircrafts. These are vertical in takeoff, and so I have I have 4 in my portfolio. The Mighty Fly is one of them, which their wingspan is only 2 car parking spots, and it has the ability to carry 100 pounds of cargo from point A to B.
That is insane.
So that would be the third category, I would say, air mobility, which is emerging fast. Especially this comes in, I would say it's a very viable solution, especially disaster hit areas.
Right, to be able to bring things in.
Yeah, exactly. Now
resources.
we are working with the firefighters to bring, when we have the fires, especially people who are on the front line, you have to get the goods to them to make things happen, right? So at that time, like if the conditions are not favorable and someone flying that plane is riskier because you don't want to put people's life at risk. So if you unmanned aircraft can do that, so the frontline workers get the support that they need to do their job in a better way. So all these innovations are going to come, and the next would be the nuclear energy, because with the AI, and then the power requirement is going to go up. Right. So like depending upon like how many data centers come up online in the next year and a half to 2, then definitely that's the need for the additional power. And that's why you start seeing the Google going and partnering up with the mining companies to get additional power. Now, if the nuclear energy is the way to go, there will be a lot of startups working in that in terms of the modular nuclear reactors, to like how now solar can be attached to the real estate underneath, or whatever fashion, to kind of cater to the power requirement of that particular real estate. Now imagine having a modular nuclear reactor attached to a certain real estate asset and making that real estate asset self-sufficient. And so we are going from this large, massive nuclear reactor to the modular reactor. And in that transition, there will be a lot of companies will be working in that area to make that happen, because it's a real need now because of all the AI applications and the automation, the robotics. Imagine when the humanoids becomes the major part of the workforce, and then even to charge those humanoids, you need power. So we are in like a real pickle in terms of where we're going to get access. And then now this is why even the president passing the executive orders to encourage power companies to kind of build out the infrastructure to generate more power. And it's not going to happen overnight, and it needs to happen at the grid level at the same time, in a silo fashion, like a modular framework. And that creates an opportunity for the companies to, like if you take Oklo as an example, Ohio based, they have this small reactors, like 30 years in operation, but it wasn't on the map. With AI, Oklo is the fast moving stock, and it's still pre-revenue, but it is one of the hot stocks sought after because of this promise, what it can do.
Wow.
So it went from like $15, $20 to over $70. It's like the publicly traded companies and the new companies, there's so many opportunities now to be part of the impact as well as be part of that capital appreciation.
Santhosh, what has been one book that has completely changed your life, and why?
Good to Great. The things that I learned from that book, it helped me to be a better leader, a better person, to succeed in any aspect of my life, whether it's on the personal side or professional side. And that just having that understanding of what helps you to kind of move from being good to great. And you can apply that not only to the business, to any interaction of life. And then how can you be great in that interaction? So it's just that, I think and that coupled with, don't have any expectations, keep giving.
I love
when you bring those two together, and then you don't have to worry about anything else. You just keep contributing, and universe has a way to bring it back to you.
If you could give a special shout out to anyone in the world that's made a monumental impact on your life, who would it be and why?
Mother Teresa.
Mother Teresa.
I was blessed back in the day to have one-on-one conversation with her. And then to this day, I still carry what she gave me, and I use that as my safety net.
Wow.
And then we were in a group, and she looked at me and said, "Do you have a question for me?" I said, "I do, but I don't feel comfortable." And then she said, "No, come here." She put her hand over me and walked me into the room next door. And then said, "Okay." Then we had our 5 minutes of that exchange and the things that's said, but I cannot say it out loud. But it's, to this day, it's still, rings in my ears, and, it's still fresh in my mind. And then this one, I would say, only misplaced twice, but still I was able to get it back. It was fascinating. Like in one of those instances where we were looking for our daughter's school and went to Campbell Hall, the tour, the bleachers and the sports section. So they had the bleachers expanded. I had the new phone at that time, and then this sticks to the phone, right? The new wrapper.
Yeah.
Right. And then when
It sits in your pocket. That's incredible. I would lose that in a day.
So then I pulled the phone out. It came out along with the phone, and it was sitting on that bleacher. Right. And then when we walked out after the session, then I came home and I realized, oh, shit, I don't have it. And then I was tracing back my steps, and then I realized, oh, it might have been in that, auditorium, the sports auditorium. I went back to the school, and the bleachers were folded back. I was like, I don't have it. I searched everywhere. And after 45 minutes, and Campbell Hall has a little church, and then I went in, and then did my prayers, and then I said, okay, something said to me, go back, ask for help to pull the bleachers out. And then when the guy came, and then, security guard, and then he pulled the bleachers out, and it was right there, sitting right there in the front bench.
Wow.
It was there. I said, okay, yeah. And that was the last time I had kind of lost access of it. And then I've been extra careful since then. I mean, when you have these kind of encounters in your life, it's quite transformative. And it changes your perspective on the complete outlook on your life. And then this is where it's not always about you, right? And this is where it gets connected to the spirituality, where when you operate with the belief that you doing it as a representative of the universe, then you don't get attached to the outcome, and the outcome doesn't impact you, whether it's good or bad. Everything is momentary. That's why I said, like, when somebody is happy, I mean, you cannot just get lost in that happy instant, because you don't know what's going to happen the next moment, right? That happiness can be turned into sorrow incident, because everything is momentary. Even if you're part of the sorrow moment, then, after a while, it becomes a happy moment, like forward, something else comes in. So here, like, as much as we think that we are in control in realizing outcomes, we are just reacting or playing the game that is set by the universe. And then even for us to come together, it's part of the larger play. We don't know it.
I love it.
Right? So you don't know like how it shapes and does, but it is one dot, part of this larger network. So this is where if you give your best to that dot in that instant, right, and then the vibrations of that instant will carry forward, and it unlocks other realms where you can be part of. And then when you operate with that philosophy, and everything becomes easier. So this is where when people say, don't chase money, chase good, and then money becomes the byproduct of that process. It's exactly the same logic, but it's a different way of framing it.
Santhosh, it was such an amazing opportunity to have you come on the show today. I really appreciate you spending time educating myself, our listeners, everyone, from all across the world here. So thank you so much. Where can people get in contact with you, or what's the best way for founders to get to know you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And you're an exceptional person. You have an amazing team. What I liked about you is that you always you are very humble, and I think the first time when we met was at the Founders Boost. I think it was like a while back, 6-7 years ago.
I
where
think
that
so.
was part
Yeah.
of Demo Day. I think that was the first encounter that we had. But I think I haven't changed. Like who you are at the core is the same. That speaks volumes about the person, and then it can be attributed towards the different things along the way. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to come here and talk to you about all subjects, I would say.
Of course. No, it's our pleasure. And, for people that are looking for investment, is there, do you want to direct them to your site or to
I think the best way is the LinkedIn.
LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think that's the only source. And then even the website, I kept it very minimal for a reason. But I think if anybody wants to connect with me, the best source is the LinkedIn.
Awesome, Santhosh. Well, again, thank you so much. For everyone listening at home, I'm Sean Goldfaden from Coefficient Labs, and this is Demo Day. Peace, guys.